Alex, thank you so much for agreeing to do this training today. Alex Campbell is the online system developer for the application and reporting system used by the Champaign County Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Boards. Alex, I will turn it over to you. You can give a little bit of background on yourself and we can get started with the training. Thank you again.
Sounds good. Kim, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I've been a consultant to the boards for the last 13, 14 years and have thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated the collaboration with them. I am actually just finished a 5-year tenure with NAMI of McHenry County as executive director there, and have also been an executive director of Home of the Sparrow in McHenry County, which is for homeless women and children. So hopefully what you'll hopefully you've experienced, and hopefully you'll see here as well, that much of our design is from the perspective of you're having to enter information that is asked for by the different boards. So having said all of that, as we go along, certainly don't hesitate to ask questions. We're actually putting together a cheat sheet of sorts, frequently asked questions document that will be available to reference in case you run into issues along the way that you can refer to. Certainly, you can always check in with the board or myself. The rest of the consulting I do is primarily focused on behavioral health organizations, and now that I'm no longer leading the NAMI affiliate here in McHenry County, my consulting is focusing on helping other agencies with areas of operations that might need support, whether it's process improvement, systems consulting, leveraging the systems you have, or actually there is one of the local agencies there retained me to help them select a new system and lead them through the requirements and selection process. Grant writing and community collaboration are some of the other aspects of my practice. So having said all that, appreciate the opportunity to meet all of you, and actually I recognize some of the names that I've either actually talked to directly or through email. But for today, we're going to talk generally about just accessing and navigating through the system. There'll be a brief reference to agency registration. Kim, if you would, you can talk a little bit about the funding boards and the differences. We'll get into logins, and then I'll demonstrate, accessing the system. We'll talk about just some general administrative things around passwords and, timelines in terms of reporting, filling out applications for the new fiscal year. I can't believe it. We're talking about 2024, 2025 already. We'll get into data entry and maintenance, agency details, and why that's particularly important over the last year, specifically around maintaining the board member list and where that list exists now. We'll talk about the application and the different forms that exist for you to complete in requesting funding. We'll also talk about the ongoing quarterly reports and what's involved with those in terms of the reporting that's required every quarter. And then we'll talk briefly about the compliance items and how to keep that updated. Then data maintenance. We'll talk just briefly about the notion or the requirement really that each user within that uses the system has their own individual login that is not shared. And are there users in your organization that have no longer need access or no longer with the organization? We want to make sure that they're rendered not in use if that's the case. So to that end, As you know, or may know, may not know, the URL, and again, this bar up here is CCMHDDBRDS.org. So Champaign County Mental Health Developmental Disability Boards.org. One of the aspects that we worked on to facilitate the navigation is in the past, you'd come in, you get the various background information. You would then scroll down and log into the agency homepage. You don't have to do that anymore, though it's never a bad idea just to double check to make sure there's nothing new in the message board, but you can access that login right off the bat at the top through the horizontal menu bar. Let me just finish scanning down this homepage and talk just briefly about the registration. So we weren't going to get into the registration process. Kim, I think where we left it was that if you are a new agency, then there is a registration process. If you have not been funded, if you've been funded in the past but have not been funded, for a couple or 3 years, there might be a re-registration process required, as was the case last year. Kim, I think we left it that they would check in with your office in those circumstances.
Yeah, that's probably best. If you are new, a brand new agency, you will need to register. If you have been previously funded, it's best to check in with us to see if within the past few years you did redo the registration or if you need to re-register.
And so here's some, instructions were you to need to register. Also, too, you'll see at the bottom of the homepage are various documents that are in play relative to being funded by the Mental Health or Developmental Disability Board. So, and you've got your different requirements, register, return to registration. Again, these are ways of getting at it quickly through a navigation step. But let's just excuse me. There was two-factor authentication. And so when your agency sets you up as a user, one of the aspects will be for you to select whether or not you receive the code via text message, voicemail, or email. We are recommending that you do not do email. That text message seems to be by far the quickest. Same with voicemail. Email can run into firewall issues. So ideally would be for you to select the text message option. So I'm going to put in the wrong number just to show you what will happen if you put in the wrong number. Excuse me. So this is what the home page is going to look like to you. And what we're going to do actually is that there are some agencies that are actually entering claims, and they're doing that. Some of those agencies are doing it by taking files out of their system and uploading it into this system. We're not going to get into that. What we're going to do is concentrate on the agency set of menu items, but I would alert you to, and I've got agency users here because that's for the agency administrator. Typically it's the executive director. But what I want to get into is a couple of things on changing the password. I always recommend that it gets changed fairly frequently, say every 3 to 6 months. And in this particular case, it requires that there is one uppercase, one lowercase, one numeric character, and at least one special character, and a combination of at least 8. So in this case, I'm not going to change it, but that would be the process for changing it. Excuse me again. You can change your two-factor authentication. Let's say that you decide, excuse me, I'm afraid I came up with a bit of a cold overnight. It could be a voice call or a text message. Again, we're going to, I think, remove this email message because it's, though very few have chosen it, it has caused issues in the past with their local firewall. If it's a phone number, you're doing text message or a voice call, then you would enter your phone number and then update the user record. Agency details. So what's important here is that we would like to encourage you to look at this, particularly when you apply for funds, to ensure that the required data, and you'll see that the fields with the asterisks are required fields, that they are up to date and correct. And something up here. Well, we're not going to spend time on this part. Now, what I'm not noticing, and I saw it before, is in agency details, and I see that we didn't set it up for this demo. You'll see at the bottom are a board member list, and that is to be completed as part of, completed or updated as the case may be for purposes of your application, and then throughout the funding year. But if we get back to the main menu, we're talking about where the various aspects of, and actually I think here's our board member list. So you have to hit the home and then the board member list, excuse me, is underneath the second reference point for the agency details, and it's underneath there. So this is where you would put in the position of the board member, their name, and typically, I guess, Kim, would this be the office address or address
No,
of
I
the
think
agency, or
for agency board members, it should be their agency board members address. This is just these are our staff, so that's why our staff addresses are using the office.
but you're saying it should be the personal? Looks like there's somebody to be admitted to. Oh, Kim, you saw it. Okay.
Yes, it should be their, if it's their agency board, it should be their agency board's actual address, because there is reason that we may need to contact their agency board.
Gotcha. What we are going to go over today is are the following: application, quarterly reports, compliance items, document upload. The clinician's client claims and all claims details deals with data entry, so we're not going to get into that for this training session. So if we click on application, what you'll do then is select the particular board that you are seeking funding from. Kim, did you want to talk about the I/DD special initiatives at all on this?
I'll just briefly say that that is a joint project by both boards, and that fund is from the sale of the two Scylla homes that the boards previously owned. That has its own set of priorities, so if you are interested in applying for that fund, please pay attention to those priorities.
So what you have here is then you select the particular funding source. What we're really talking about here is 2025 in terms of because this is for funding that would start July 1st. Is that correct, Kim?
Yes.
Actually, get back to the homepage for a second, because let's see, this is where to. So on the homepage message board, you'll see information again relative to requirements that you have here. So getting again to the application, it's selecting the source, the fiscal year, and as you complete sections, and we'll talk about those sections momentarily here, as you complete sections and save them and submit them, this percent complete will track how you're progressing with that. You'll see here that here's the application period from December 22nd through February 12th, and I believe they're allowing for an extra 2 weeks versus years past for that. Next is the right now, this is one of the downloadable files, and we'll get into this in terms of filling out the personnel form. Again, the application reminder here, it's 4:30 Central Time on Monday, February 12th. What we would certainly encourage is that, let me put this back. What we would certainly encourage is to, and believe me, I've done it in my executive director roles of, waiting to the last week or so. Certainly, the sooner you're able to complete it and submit it, the better. The one is that you're identifying the program or programs that you are seeking funding for. What will happen is that there is a cloning process, so that if you received funding last year, when you come in here, you'll see the same program this year. If you're seeking funding for a different program, there's your edit, then you would go ahead and delete that here. Next is then there's two, what we call in step 2. So number 1 is to identify the programs you're seeking funding for. The amount requested is going to come from the revenue form automatically. Step 2 are those agency forms, and for agreement for interagency cooperation, what you do is you hit create and then create again. And what you'll notice, and this is the case with each of the sections of not only the application, but also of the quarterly reports, is you'll see in the header, once you've done the creation of the form, is it will show your status and then the number of required questions to be answered that are still unanswered. And so we say, see yellow highlights, the field background is yellow for those fields that are looking to be completed and then saved. So you'll notice that there is save my responses, do not submit yet. What will change then is and you go ahead and hit save. When your header shows pending and then okay, you notice then the submit my responses, no further edits allowed will appear. Okay, then you can take a moment to look it over, make sure that you're comfortable with it. What I'm going to do is just save this for a moment and exit. And you'll notice at the moment that in the header of the overall application are the different sections. And they're saying sections remaining to be completed. If we go back to the agreement that we have in pending status and actually go ahead and submit it, and if we go back, you'll notice now that that no longer is part of this list here, and that it shows a percent of 13% complete up to that point. Okay. Next is the cultural and linguistic competence plan. There is the same process of step one, create the report. I didn't select the board. Now, this gets into a number of different, you identify, select an area. Once you select the area, you define the steps for that area, add action step. And then what you do is and if you need to have more than one action step, you'll notice that there are 5 sections to each step. If you want to have the whole screen display, one option is to go up to the upper left, and this will hide the vertical menu bar. And so if there are more than one steps for principal standard, then you can add action step, go back up then and repeat steps 1 and 2 for all the areas that are involved with your with preparing that. There are cases, and I can't speak to it, Chandra would have to do that, of filling this out versus uploading a document. The preference is for the agency to fill it out online. And when you're done, there is a PDF option for you to have an electronic record of that to file away. So with that in mind, and I won't go ahead and actually create that form. Excuse me. So those are the 2 steps for purposes of, or the 2 sections for purposes of step 2. When we get into step 3, now this is where you get into the program specific section. And what you'll find is that there are the following sections to be completed and submitted for each of the programs that you're seeking funding for. So for step 3, program specific, you have the program plan narrative, personnel forms, and we'll show you how that gets created, the revenue and expense form, which have some connection to each other, and the budget narrative. So there's 5 sections that need to be completed and submitted for each of the programs that you're seeking funding for. So if we look at the program narrative, what will happen is if you're applying for the same program, funding for the same program as the previous year where funding was provided for that program, you'll notice that it will be in pending status, but will pull forward the information you put in last year, so that you don't have to recreate all of that. What we've done here is, again, it's made up of describing what kind of where is it in terms of the priority, how does it align with that priority, who's the target population, scope of services. One of the things that we can do without going through each question here is that we could put out one of the documents in the for downloading it on the front page, and what a sample application looks like, a blank one. But what you'll notice throughout, and this is one of the areas where on occasion, it's a question arises. Please note the word limit associated with each question that has requesting a text form of response. If you exceed it, you won't be able to submit the document. And so, and what it will do is as you go through, it will tell you whether or not you have exceeded, when you save it, whether you have exceeded it, and it will show you where that error occurs. So you'll notice that there's no fields that have any yellow background, so we would be able to submit. And if we go back, and you'll notice that program narrative, excuse me, what do we call it here? Yeah, program plan narrative is no longer then part of the missing list. Next then is the personnel form, and there is the ability to complete it online. However, what you might recall is at the top here is the personnel form Excel template. Ideally is to take the CSV and download that. And what it looks like then when you fill it out is you have your title of the particular staff member, their name, total FTE, total salary, total FTE, then the salary. Actually, oh yeah, and then type. Okay, so the idea here is then, and is Kim, I'm wondering how familiar everyone is with this form, in terms of what's being asked for. Let me get back into opening this up to see.
Yeah, I'd say about a third to a half of the users would be doing personnel and the financial forms, and some of the other users would just be doing like the program plan and stuff like that. But I think it's still good to go ahead and cover it.
So what we have here is the total agency FTE, and so you could come in and do it this way. What the idea was that on an ongoing basis that there would be keeping current, the staff at the agency, particularly those involved with the program that the funding's received for. So it's the title, the name, the total agency FTE, the total agency salary. So total program FTE. So in other words, is the person that's being noted here. They're a full-timer, but they spend, and their full-time salary is X. But for the program, they're half of their time, so that's a 0.5 FTE. And the total program salary would be automatically calculated by virtue of taking the program FTE times the total agency salary. And then the funding's being sought from the mental health board. Again, remember, I selected mental health board as the funder, the FTE, and then the salary. What type are they, direct or indirect personnel? Are they active or not? And what's their hire date and what's their end date? So that's really what this spreadsheet is intended to have. And the idea would be that this would be updated, and then instead of filling it out here, and then you'll have the opportunity then to check it out. If it looks accurate in terms of what you were trying to load, then it will automatically create it here in the system for you. That's a mouthful. Any questions on this? Or any questions so far? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Let's see. Okay, so, and if you find for some reason that you need to, revamp something, then you can always, or you look at it and it doesn't look accurate, you can always hit clear data. So let's cancel out of here. Looks like somebody's waiting to admit there, Kim. So you've got the narrative around the program, the personnel involved with the program, and then we get into the revenue and expense. And again, I'm using something from previous year. Hit create. So one of the things that we're going to do is oh, I'm sorry, that's in the quarterly reports, excuse me. So for the revenue and expense forms, you'll notice that all of the fields here have the yellow background, so all are required, even if it's a $0. There's no dollars that fit that particular category. Please note that do not put dollar signs in, and do not put commas in. You can put decimals in, but no dollar signs and no commas. Now, one of the questions that came up last year was the ability to add a category because a relevant category revenue line does not exist here. So you can add another row to it. Under the, so you select whether it's the grant, under the grant line, or under the program service fees. And then what it will do is you'll notice under grants, it added this line. And then you put a description in as to another grant that you're receiving funding for that particular program. What other aspects? Again, you save it as you go. If I were to put in and you'll notice that it embeds the dollar sign and the comma automatically. So I just tested this, and it should not have allowed you to do that. So that's something we need to fix. Of course, it didn't happen when I was testing. Because we decided, Kim, to take away the requirement for just the demographics and residency by zip code.
Yes, that's correct.
So that will be fixed immediately. Okay. Along the way, too, if you ever wanted to download what was created, or you can always create a PDF there of the what you had completed and filled out. And you'll notice throughout the different sections the ability to print a PDF that to see what get another view of the information that you entered. Let me get back into the expense form for a second, because what you put in for your into this column here for grant CCMHB, that is what will appear in the program step, which was the first step we took. That's going to show what funding amount you're seeking from the Mental Health Board for that particular program. Expense form has much the same in the way of format. And you'll notice that for the personnel form that I uploaded, that will automatically embed then the salary and wages for this particular line. So you'll notice you'll come in here and you'll say, well, I can't edit it. That is because it's tied to the personnel form. And it's tied to the personnel form being completed in order to be reflected here. So along the way, there'll be tracking then the total expense and total revenue, and any deficit that might occur by virtue of the numbers put into each. The last part of step 3 is the budget narrative. And again, you select the program and create, and it brings down to identifying that there are 3 questions that need to be answered. Quite a bit of room allowed for those 3. Once they're filled in, then same as before, so I will just you notice because I filled the 3 out, submit button comes up. So that is the set of 5 for purposes of the program specific information that's being sought. Let's assume for a moment then that you've submitted and completed all of the other sections. Then the authorization and cover form is really the step then that finalizes the application and makes the various boards aware of it being ready to go. So you'll notice that we had what was the first one? I can't remember the first form we filled out. But for the authorization form itself, it's acknowledging that you agree to the different terms associated with the application. And if we were to then just fill those and save those out, what will be left on the the missing form. So authorization form cannot be submitted until we finish the cultural competency form, the expense report, and the personnel report. If you remember, the program plan narrative was submitted, so was the revenue form, though incorrectly, and then the personnel form, so that that personnel form was not submitted. So once those are all submitted, what you're looking for here on the authorization and cover form is it being okay with no other. So the pending would be okay. And so this okay is really for the authorization and cover form itself. You want the pending, you want the status to say okay. And once that's the case, you'll have a submit button comes up, and that will then upon hitting submit, as long as it's before 4:30 on the 12th of February next year, that will be, you'll receive an email back, whoever the primary contact is that's listed in the agency details, they will receive an email saying that it has been submitted to the respective board. What questions on the application? No questions? See if there's anything in the chat. Doesn't look like it. Okay. All righty. Next are the quarterly reports. And what you'll start with is, and we'll, these instructions are available if you click on the wedge, but you'll have the required reports. And here's the grid that shows what's due and when. And these various sections will only show up for the particular quarter selected. So if you were to go to the performance outcome report, that won't display until the fourth quarter. And of course, the cultural and linguistic competence report is due quarters 2 and quarters 4 only. So again, there's downloadable files here to give.
Could I interject briefly?
Oh, please, absolutely.
Right, just nope, scroll back to where you were.
Oh, I'm sorry, sure.
That's okay. If you are unable to complete your quarterly reports by the due date, you should submit a request for extension of report deadline prior to the due date of those quarterly reports being due. And that is in the downloadable files right below the grid of which report is due.
Program revenue, expense, residency by zip code, and utilization forms are all due every quarter. And so if we were to, right now we're in the second quarter. So what does the program report look like? It's looking at the target for community service events, service screening contacts. This was cleaned up a little bit. I think we're missing an initial non-treatment plan clients, treatment plan clients. And these are the targets, and then what are the actual number of new clients relative to each of these categories. There is a comment section to identify or share any unexpected findings or service details you feel that the respective board should or might want to be aware of. Next is the revenue report. Actually, we have it listed here a little bit different order, don't we? Residency by zip code. Here is a case where you have all of these fields being required. I already created this, so let's see what happens. The mental health and DD board team thought it would be better for that not to be required for each zip code to save you having to go through and put zeros in all of those. So you will see these as being a white background going forward, and you will not be required to put a zero um, in each field if there are no um, resident numbers to put in. So look for that to be only requiring you to actually, all you need to do is just fill in the particular zip code that has any residents associated with it. Same goes for the utilization demographic report. This one does not have that. So this one has been taken care of just fine. If we just fill 12 here, for instance, and then be able to submit that. So it's just the zip code by residency that we need to check on.
And with the demographics report, even though you can submit without entering in any information, it is important that you fill in all sections of the demographic information, and your sections totals should match. So if you had 12 people in the age group, that was your total for race and gender, those should also match. And if you
Thanks, Kim.
happen to hit submit and you didn't, you forgot to fill in the rest, just send us an email or call us. We can, as long as it's before the deadline, we can easily move the form back into pending so that you are able to go in there and make those edits. And it's really not a big deal to us. I worked on the other side doing these forms prior to joining the board staff, and I probably called every time a report was due saying I hit submit too soon. Please, please reopen my form. So don't hesitate to give us a call.
Again, next are the revenue and expense forms. Here's the revenue form, and it pulls forward with the amount that was applied for. If you recall my putting that in. And again, for the revenue and expense, you are having to fill out for the time being each field, whether it's zero or not, or whether even if it's zero. Again, same ability to add rows. What from the expense side, there is a requirement, and remind me if you would, Kim. I'm now drawing somewhat of a blank on the variance percent Um, and again, why it hasn't been set up to show what a variance looks like. But if there's a variance to what was applied for and what the actual is, then there's a requirement to fill out a comment stating why that variance exists. The what we had in the past was a pretty small comment field, and we've expanded that. We've doubled the size of it to allow for a little more exhaustive description of the reason for the variance. If the variance exceeds a certain percent, and I'm at a loss to remember exactly what that
Yeah,
percent
that's
is.
actually going to be changing with the new program year. So
Okay.
it'll be in the instructions, the
Uh,
new amounts. So I just won't comment on what they are because I'm afraid I'm going to tell the wrong amount. So
and we might put a little parenthetical in there, maybe, comments required if variance is greater than. Of course, I think the comments field shows up in an editable form if that's the case automatically anyway. Okay, thanks. Um, Again, if it's quarter 2 or 4, it's let me think about this for a second. If you've already got if it's already been created, then I believe what happens is that it pulls forward what was created and then needs to be updated. This is the mid-year, so this is the end. Combination plan year-end progress report. And this is the mid-year. So this would be for the second quarter. This would be for the fourth quarter. And updating the information there. Performance measure outcomes. So that looks like it's is there a form for that, Kim, that they're uploading?
yeah, and that is up above in the downloadable files section.
Right here. There we go. Okay.
And that changes with changes that we make within the application forms. So you should pay attention that you're not just working off of last year's document when you do the end of your document for the current program year, because we will be making some changes.
So based on the requirements as reflected in the grid, once each of those sections we just went through for the particular quarter you're in have been submitted, then you've met the requirement for quarterly reporting. The due date for the quarterly reports, I believe, is the end of the month after the quarter ends.
Yes, except for the fourth quarter,
right.
those are due in August because we know that 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 performance measure outcome report is a lot more involved. So we give you an extra month. In the downloadable file section of the login and registration page, you'll find the allocation schedules and timelines, which lists when the quarterly reports are due throughout the year. It also lists when the boards meet. So.
And that would be at the bottom here?
Yep. That is called, CCMHB important dates and CCDDB important dates. So if you click to download those, you will be given a PDF option. We do also include those when we send out contracts at the beginning of a program year. Of course, there is sometimes changes if meetings get canceled. We do update that and we repost it every time we make a change. So if you think you don't have the most current version, you can re-download that from the system. And it is probably, it's as current as it can be. Like I said, we upload or we change those every time we do make a change. So the Mental Health Board probably reflects that their December meeting has been canceled for 2023.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's the quarterly reports. The remaining item oops. So there are laid out different document types and the period that they are associated with in terms of when they're due, and then there's a due date associated with it. There is a status here, and that just shows whether or not it's past due or not. For instance, board meetings for fiscal 2024, first quarter were due near the end of October. They haven't been uploaded as yet. This is a good screen to use this. And then, I had trouble with this morning, so let's see if it gets, but in order to then comply with the requirement here, so you would come to the upload file. Yep, still got the error. You would then get the screen to upload the particular document, and what we'll show then is who the user is and the date that it was uploaded, and then the mental health and DD board's team will get an email saying that it's been uploaded, and for them to go look to see if it complies with what they're expecting, for that particular line item. At any point in time, you can go in and view the file that you uploaded if the need arose. One way to look at this is to, sort this. Actually, not doing the actual date. Sort by. I think we've set it up this way, but I'll make sure that's the case. Is sort by the due date, and that at a glance you can see how it's progressing with meeting those uploaded requirements. The key here is making sure the fiscal year we'll default this to the fiscal year that we're in, which is 2024. That was essentially the training. Kim, what did I miss in terms of the key areas that we wanted to go over?
Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions about what we reviewed today?
It was a mouthful for an hour, so certainly this is, and if not, certainly, let Kim know and we'll get right back to you. But any questions at the moment? I'm not hearing anybody, Kim.
Nope, I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay, good idea to check that. Okay.
All right, well, if there's no questions, I do appreciate everybody joining us. If you do have any questions that come up afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out, send me an email. If I can't answer them myself, I will forward them on to Alex and we'll get back to you. As Alex mentioned, he is creating a frequently asked questions document. As a person who joined this Zoom meeting today, I have, as long as you've signed in to the Google Doc, I have all of your email addresses and that will be shared with you. Again, it is important that you remember the downloadable files section. There's a wealth of information. We try to keep those as up to date as possible, from funding guidelines to important dates to funding priorities. We try to keep all of those documents in there so that you're always able to find them. Meeting dates we keep on the login page so you are aware of the upcoming meetings. The Zoom link is also posted there. If you are going to be late with your quarterly reports, please use the extension request form. If you do not submit your quarterly reports by the deadline and you have not submitted an extension request, your payment is automatically held. So payments are usually released or created the Monday after the reports are due. And if we haven't heard from you and you haven't submitted a report, payments will be held. So please make sure to get that extension request done. It's just, you've got to communicate with us and we appreciate it when you do. So if there is no other questions, that's all we have for you today.
Thanks, everyone. Kim, you want to hold on or give me a call?
Yeah, I'll stop the recording and wait.